"Why are you sitting alone, young lady?" The voice was light as silk, with a soft South Indian lilt, coming from just over Leona Hartley's right shoulder. It wasn't abrupt, nor loud, nor laced with pity, but it startled Leona, not because the question was too personal, but because it was the first time during this endlessly long evening that someone, anyone, acknowledged her existence. Leona slowly turned her head, afraid she might have imagined it. But no, the woman was there. Amira Dasgupta leaned down slightly, balancing a heavy silver tray in her left hand, where glimmering orange cocktails shimmered like tiny orbiting planets under the chandelier. Her eyes were warm and steady, standing out among the sparkling gowns and clinking crystal glasses. No one in the ballroom had looked at Leona. Not a glance, not a polite nod. Guests passed her like one might pass a statue, no worse as if she were just a piece of vintage floral wallpaper. Yet this woman, a server, shattered that frozen silence with just one question. And that question hit Leona like a sudden wave breaking across a still, dead lake. She swallowed dryly. Her hands trembled lightly on the hem of her dark velvet dress. The ballroom at Wexley Hall, a renovated castle turned luxury resort in Yorkshire, glowed with cream gold and crystal hues. Galaxy-shaped chandeliers floated mid-air. Live jazz drifted from the bar corner, the quartet playing cheek to cheek. The event was orchestrated to make anyone feel small, unless they knew how to exist in a world of smiles and champagne flutes. But in a shadowed corner near the staff corridor, one 6-year-old Leona Hartley sat in her wheelchair. Her navy gown pooled like a strip of darkness flowing off the chair. No one led her to a table. No one asked if she was all right. Not a glance, question, or place for her in this space. The first time Amira passed by, she noticed a young girl sitting still, hands neatly folded in her lap. The second time, she noted, no one approached. The third time, Amira's brow furrowed slightly. The girl still hadn't moved or spoken, no sign of interaction. No soul at this lavish event seemed to see her. Amira stopped beside the wheelchair, as if she carried a weight heavy enough to shift the room's gravitational pull. She wasn't just serving drinks. She was recognizing something more profound, that in front of her sat a human being with a story, dignity, and silence waiting to be seen. Leona replied quickly, a bit tense. "I'm fine." The words came out like a reflex, but her fingers betrayed her, gripping her dress, twisting together like they didn't know where to rest. Amira tilted her head, expression unreadable, but her gaze remained gentle. "You don't look fine, and if I may be honest, I think this party is missing its brightest light." Leona nearly laughed. "Nearly. Everyone's busy," she said, sounding indifferent. "I'm not part of them." And it wasn't a lie. She'd been wheeled in from a private van by a last-minute hired aide. The woman had parked near a massive pot of white lilies, then vanished like smoke. Since then, the world kept turning without her. Even the photographer had asked her to shift aside. "Just a little," he'd said, "so you're not blocking the central shot." Leona whispered, "I don't belong here. This place wasn't meant for me." Amira scanned the room, glasses raised, cameras flashing, laughter mixed with music and the scent of brown butter. "It's not that you don't belong here," Amira said quietly. "They've forgotten how to see the ones who remind them of life's bitter truths." Time froze. Leona felt her throat tighten. She looked at Amira more closely than before. Bronze skin, deep warm eyes, a face not young, but bright, etched with a kind of resilience that spoke louder than age. "I used to dance," Leona said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. "Before the accident, I would be a choreographer." Amira smiled, her gaze softening. "Really? My youngest girl, Anaya, used to watch dance shows endlessly. Nearly broke our coffee table trying to pirouette." Leona couldn't help but smile, lips pressed together. "I was on the teen dance team at Lincoln Academy. We were driving to a charity event last year. A truck ran a red light." Her voice cracked. Amira whispered, "I'm so sorry." Leona shrugged, her right shoulder moved. The left was stiff. "They say I might recover partial movement." Slowly. "My dad, he stopped dancing too. Since that day, he used to be so strong. CEO of Hartley Global. He used to be someone who never bowed his head." She paused. Still balancing her tray flawlessly in one hand, Amira quietly sat on the edge of the nearby chair. No sound. No complaint. "Dancing," she said, isn't just about your legs. People think it is. But really, dancing is listening to the music, yourself, and the version of you that wants to rise again. Leona looked up. Amira was unlike any other server. She didn't avert her gaze, didn't hurry away. She sat there as if the entire ballroom couldn't shake her gravity. "You used to dance?" Leona asked. Amira nodded slowly. "Tap dancer. Mumbai, 2002. No big stages, just church halls and community events. Then I lost a leg to diabetic complications. But in my mind, I never stopped dancing. I still dance in my bones when the choir sings every Sunday." And in that moment, a young English girl, heir to a powerful corporate empire, and an Indian woman in a server's shoes sat side by side, sharing what no one else in that glittering ballroom could see. Something called truth. "I used to tap dance," Amira repeated, as if telling a fairy tale to herself. "When I was 15. We were poor. But my mother insisted. We can't afford the stage lights, but we can borrow the floorboards. I practiced in our crooked kitchen. Every tap of my heel rang out like a declaration that I still existed." Leona remained silent, her hands again twisting into each other on her dress. A current of memory began to rise uncontrollable. "Before the accident, I had a performance at the Royal Theatre of York. My father bought me silver shoes. They weren't professional, just kids' ballet slippers, but I thought they were magic. I practiced day and night. He would stand there watching me for hours, not blinking. 'My daughter has feet like the wind,' he used to say." The jazz music from the ballroom corner seemed to fade, leaving only the whisper of silk and the soft clinking of crystal-like wind chimes. Leona's voice dropped so low that Amira had to lean in to hear it. After the performance, on the way back, a container truck ran a red light. The car we were in was thrown into the trees. I don't remember much, just the smell of smoke, the sound of shattering glass, and my dad's voice calling my name when no one else could hear it. My spine broke in 2 places. 3 days later, he had a stroke. They said it was from the emotional shock. Amira said nothing. She placed her silver tray on a nearby table and gently laid her hand on the armrest of Leona's wheelchair. "I'm not used to people seeing me as weak," Leona said, trying to smile, but her voice trembled. "At this party, people avoid me like I'm reminding them of something they don't want to remember. They want to forget that this body," she tapped lightly on her wheelchair, "used to be a stage." Amira raised an eyebrow, her voice soft but weighted. "They're not avoiding you. They're avoiding themselves. Because when they look at you, they're forced to remember that sometimes the most beautiful things can break. And not everyone knows how to listen to pain without turning away." Leona gave a bitter, scoffing laugh. "I'm just an inconvenient ornament in their picture." Number Amira cut in, eyes steady. "You are the music they don't dare to hear." Across the ballroom, the clink of glasses shattered the moment. A middle-aged woman in a golden silk gown glanced briefly their way. Amira straightened her posture, a flash of icy focus in her eyes. Then she turned back to Leona, her voice now deeper. "Do you want to dance? Here?" Leona widened her eyes, almost laughing. "Here. Right now. Just the 2 of us. No stage. No audience." Leona swallowed hard. I don't even know how to move anymore. My muscles are weak. My left shoulder barely responds. And I'm afraid I'll look pathetic." Amira smiled, a smile free of pity. "You don't need to stand to dance. Rhythm isn't in the legs. It's in the hands, the back, the neck, the breath. And most of all, in the part you still want to move." Leona glanced around. No one was paying attention. No one cared. The music changed. A mellow jazz version of Moon River began, soft and stripped down, flowing gently from the corner where the band transitioned between standards. Amira stood and tilted slightly. "May I?" Leona hesitated for a second. Then she placed her hand in Amira's. One hand, one look. Amira began to sway her shoulders gently, just enough to transfer motion. Leona let her body follow. Each movement slid through the fog of fear, of longing. She turned her wrist slightly. Her shoulders moved. Amira moved beside her, guiding without imposing. In the shadowed corner of an elite gala, 2 women, one with a prosthetic leg, one with a paralyzed body, were dancing. No one watched, and no one needed to. In a world full of artificial glances, at last, There was a real movement. The lights didn't change. Glasses were still being raised. The music floated. And sweet, hollow compliments drifted through the air like pollen. But Leona and Amira had completed a dance in the shadowed corner, where two hands remained gently entwined. A dance without legs. Without an audience. Without permission. As the final note of Moon River faded away, Leona couldn't stop the tightness rising in her throat. She didn't cry, but her eyes burned. Amira gave a soft nod as if to say, "There. You did it. You know," Leona whispered. "Earlier tonight, I was hoping to disappear. But now, I'm scared that I actually might." Amira smiled. She didn't need to say anything more. Right then, a voice rang out behind them, high-pitched and sweet enough to slice. "Amira, Table 9 still hasn't received their tarts, and Table 4 needs more white wine. What exactly are you doing?" A woman in a platinum-gray suit dress, hair slicked into a precise bun, heels clacking against the wooden floor. Her smile was like a glossy coating over cold steel. Sophie Aldridge is a senior communications advisor at Hartley Global and a personal aide to Gregory Hartley, and also the one who'd whispered to reporters, "Leona won't be speaking tonight." The girl's not emotionally stable enough. Amira straightened instantly, but she didn't flinch. "I was just ensuring Miss Hartley didn't need anything further." Sophie's eyes skimmed over Leona like she was a misplaced decorative piece. "She has everything she needs," Sophie replied, her voice like chilled glass. Then she leaned in, closer to Leona, her smile unchanged but her eyes sharp as razors. "Dear Leona, it's best not to get too familiar with the help. People talk." The final sentence struck like a slap, wrapped delicately in silk ribbon. Amira said nothing, but her jaw clenched briefly long enough for Leona to notice. If someone was going to push back, it might have been Amira, but she didn't. She gave a courteous nod, lifted her tray back into position, and stepped away into the crowd. Leona stayed seated, but something inside her had awakened. Not anger, something older. A small shard of who she used to be. The girl who once stood in a stage light, head held high, shoulders turning like the wind. A small shard of refusal. She watched Amira slip through gowns and champagne foam like a quiet current that would not yield. And Amira's question still echoed in her mind. "Why are you sitting alone?" For the first time that night, Leona began to wonder truly. Had she grown used to letting the world forget she existed? Was this silence not just imposed by others, but a kind of armor she had learned to wear? The music changed again. Another tray of drinks swept past. And Leona still sat there, near the white lilies. But this time, she was no longer just part of the wallpaper. As the ballroom lights began to dim, signaling the upcoming bride and groom's duet, Leona still sat where she was, but the silence inside her had changed. She was no longer just the girl placed in the corner. She was the only one in this room who had truly danced. In her mind, memories spun like reels of an old film. The melody, the touch, Amira's gaze, and Sophie's voice like a cold needle piercing her spine. She looked around. People drifting by, empty congratulations, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. In that moment, she didn't want to be Gregory Hartley's daughter anymore. She just wanted to be Leona. Without them. Without the legacy. Without the chair. Just herself. And a dance. "Are you hungry?" A voice as light as wind came from behind. Amira had returned. Leona turned quickly, surprised. "You came back? I noticed you didn't touch any of the mains," Amira shrugged, placing a small plate of triangle-cut sandwiches on the side table. "Thought maybe you needed something simpler, no foie gras or caviar." Leona laughed. Not loudly, but genuinely. "You came back. My mother used to say, if you see someone hungry and don't feed them, don't ever call yourself a kind person." Leona looked at the plate. She reached out, still a bit shaky. But Amira didn't grab her hand, didn't interfere. She just stood calmly, as if her still presence was supporting her. "You remind me of Anaya," Amira said softly. She was quiet like a cat, until she stepped on stage. Then nothing could stop her. Leona chewed slowly, then asked quietly, "Did she dance?" "Everywhere. Hallways, bathrooms, gas stations. She used to say, "The world is a stage, Mama." Then came tuition bills, long work shifts. You know how it goes. Life. Leona nodded. She knew too well. My dad used to dance with me every New Year's Eve, she said, eyes distant. Wherever we were, he'd play Moon River, I'd stand on his feet, and we'd spin across the living room. Silly, but it was tradition. Amira smiled, her voice hushed. That's beautiful. He promised we'd dance again at this wedding. Said he'd make the whole room stare. The Hartley girls will lead the dance floor, he said. Amira tilted her head. So what happened? Leona let out a laugh, this time tinged with bitterness. Reality. Wheelchairs, pain meds, pitiful stares. And people avoid my father like he's a walking reminder of failure. He doesn't talk much anymore. His eyes are open, but he doesn't see anyone. I think he lost more than I did. Amira didn't look away. I don't see pity. I see a girl who showed up, sat tall, and still shines brighter than half the room. Leona's throat tightened not from flattery, but because Amira said it like it was a sacred truth. Then Amira added, almost casually, "You know, dancing doesn't require standing." Leona frowned. It doesn't? Rhythm lives in the hands, breath, shoulders, and gaze. My leg may be artificial now, but I still dance in my kitchen every morning. Not for anyone to see. Just for me. Leona swallowed hard. You lost your leg? 5 years ago. Diabetes. Anaya cried more than I did. I told her, you don't need 2 legs to feel rhythm. You need one heart that still wants to dance. Leona closed her eyes. She pictured Amira tapping to the beat in a small kitchen, no one watching, just her and the morning light. The music shifted. A slow piano melody began, with a soft bass underneath. Moon River returned. This time, like a calling, Amira tilted her head, looked straight into Leona's eyes. Well, a waltz in place? Leona's eyes widened. Here? Right now? No stage, no spotlight, just a corner of a party and a promise that hasn't been fulfilled. Leona hesitated. Her hand gripped the armrest. She hadn't moved like that in months, but something in her chest cracked open. Not pain, a thirst. She nodded. Amira set her tray aside, reached out both hands. May I? Leona placed her hand in Amira's, gentle, tentative, but real. Amira leaned in. She began to sway, slowly. Leona let her body follow. Their hands moved with the music, their shoulders with the tide. No one watched, and no one needed to, because this time, Leona Hartley truly danced. As the final notes of Moon River faded, Leona almost forgot she was sitting in a wheelchair. She looked up at Amira as if this woman had pulled her from a bottomless abyss, not with ropes, but with rhythm and quiet resolve. Amira gave a subtle nod. See? She whispered. No stage required. Leona murmured, almost afraid to be overheard. Thank you. Amira didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced around the room, as if surveying the terrain. Don't thank me, she said at last. I just helped you remember who you were. Leona smiled, a real smile, and in her eyes was the return of the girl who once believed the world belonged to dancing feet. Then came the sharp sound of stilettos, each click as precise as a blade. Sophie Aldridge had returned. This time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Richard Pembroke, a senior board member of Hartley Global. His face was ice, his gaze sweeping the room like he was reviewing a profit report. Sophie stopped beside Amira, her voice silk-thin and razor-sharp. Amira, the kitchen needs someone at the wash station. We expect you to return to your post immediately. Amira stood tall, her eyes steady. I'm on my break, Mrs. Aldridge. I was only conversing with a guest, Sophie interrupted, smiling though her lips barely moved, which is discouraged, especially when the guest is the chairman's daughter. Leona turned. She didn't do anything wrong. She helped me. Richard cut in, his voice low and resonant like a bronze bell. Miss Hartley, we are very invested in your safety and public image. But please understand, there are still standards. Staff are meant to remain behind the scenes. Unchecked familiarity leads to misunderstanding. Leona no longer trembled, no longer hesitated, And what does it say that the only person who showed me care tonight is now seen as a problem? Sophie's smile remained, but it had frozen over. This is a formal event, dear, not a support group session. Amira quietly stepped back, eyes still locked with Leona's. Sophie leaned down, her whisper like velvet wrapped around stone. Everyone here is watching, and we wouldn't want you to be misinterpreted, especially considering your father's delicate condition. Leona clenched her jaw. Her eyes burned, but she turned to Amira. Can you come back later? Amira gave a slight nod. If you want me to return, I will. Sophie straightened, stepping back, her eyes glinting with victory. Amira withdrew from the ballroom, the tray empty, her shoulders still upright, and her steps steady on her prosthetic leg. Leona returned to her corner, where the white lilies still gave off their cold floral scent. But she was no longer the quiet girl sitting alone. Her hand now rested on her wheel. Her palm was warm. She had danced. She had kept a promise. And now she knew. When a promise is fulfilled, silence is no longer a prison. It becomes a place to begin. The next morning, Yorkshire's sunlight wasn't bright, just soft enough to slip through the thick curtains of the guest quarters at Wexley Castle. The sky was pale gray, mist still clinging to old oak branches and stone pathways soaked in the night's dew. The stillness was so complete that Leona could hear every click of her wheelchair against the polished wood floors. She sat by the window, wrapped in a thick shawl, watching raindrops slide down the glass like nameless memories. Inside her still stirred the strange aftertaste of the previous night, as though her body had moved in a dream, but her soul had just awakened. The dance with Amira, brief as it was, had cracked open the stillness she had surrendered to for over a year. She hadn't told her father. Gregory Hartley, now in the East Wing's medical suite, had lived in near silence since the stroke. He didn't speak or respond clearly, just minor signs. A glance, a twitch of the finger. Leona knew he had once been the man whose voice could shift the breath of a room. Now, he sat still like a stone statue, dressed in a tailored suit. IV tubes his only motion. She opened the door quietly and wheeled down the corridor to his room. Soft classical music played in the background. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and oatmeal. "Good morning," she whispered. Sophie was reviewing the medication tray. The doctors increased his dosage. He needs calm and stability. Please don't disrupt that. Leona frowned. He looks even more withdrawn than yesterday. You call that progress? Sophie lifted her head, her smile as smooth as always. You have to trust the process. Emotion can't substitute expertise. Leona said nothing. She turned toward her father. His eyes were open just for a moment, but truly open. And they landed on her face. A spark. A flicker of recognition. "Dad," she whispered. "Last night, I danced." Almost. He didn't react. "With a woman who reminded me of you. She's lost part of her body, too. But she dances in her mind every morning." She smiled faintly, her eyes brimming. "You used to say, after I sprained my ankle at Showcase, you don't need two legs to dance. You need a heart that still trembles to the music. I still have that heart, Dad." His left hand curled slightly. A subtle response, but Leona saw it. She placed her hand over his. "I'm still your partner. Hartley and Hartley. You built the legacy. I'll rebuild the beautiful part of it." She sat with him longer than usual, not letting Sophie usher her away. She didn't say anything more, just held his hand. When she returned to the ballroom, now being cleared, Leona saw staff folding linens, pulling tables, and stacking silver trays. And then she saw it. A thin envelope was placed neatly beneath the tea tray, on the same side table as yesterday. On the front, in uneven but graceful script, "To Leona." She opened it. Thin paper. Blue ink. "I didn't get a chance to say a proper goodbye. They told me I crossed the line by teaching a girl to dance without standing up. I didn't do it just for you. I did it for me, too. You reminded me of Anaya, before the world silenced her, and reminded me of myself, before the pain erased me. You have a light that people overlook, not the dazzling kind, the steady kind warm enough for others to place their hands near and remember they're alive. They'll tell you to stay still, but I hope you keep moving your hands, even when no one claps, even when no one watches. And if one day you hear Moon River again, Close your eyes. I'll be dancing with you. Amira. Asterisk. Asterisk. Leona read it 3 times. Each time, her chest tightened. She didn't cry, but she knew her heart had just made a decision. She wheeled back to her room, opened her laptop. She didn't email Sophie. She didn't file a complaint with resort management. She sent a 3-page letter to the Hartley Global Board of Directors. In it, she wrote, "If a company takes pride in legacy, it should also know when to bow to character. I'm not asking them to bring Amira back. I'm demanding they give her a stage." And for the first time in months, Leona Hartley didn't write as an heiress. She wrote as a survivor, and someone who had come back to life. 3 days later, something was being prepared in a small room behind Wexley Castle's secondary hall, dimly lit and still carrying the faint scent of fresh paint. Quietly, but with intention, Leona sat in the center of the room, a soft spotlight washing over her shoulders. Her wheelchair had been polished to a shine. Her dress wasn't floor-length like at the wedding, but fitted fluid, yet unhidden. It showed ownership, not ornament. Beside her, Amira Dasgupta appeared. No tray, no uniform, no expression of quiet submission, just calm eyes, and the same steady hands that once held up a shaking world. "You found me?" Amira smiled, stepping closer. Leona nodded. "I had to call 3 local churches and bribe a cab driver to get there. You were in the back row, singing with the choir like you'd never been dismissed from the old world." "I never belonged to that world," Amira replied, pulling up a chair, "but I never stopped singing." Leona tilted her head. "I need a dance partner. This time, there's a stage, light, and an audience. But there's also me. And you." A pause. Then Amira exhaled. "Well, if there's an audience, then we better dance like the whole world's watching." That evening, an unannounced performance occurred in a modest ballroom in the West Wing. There were no banners, no press, but Leona had written handwritten letters to board members, key staff, and Sophie Aldridge. She wrote, "I don't want to stand. I want to bring the stage to my eye level." The room glowed dimly. Small lights, wooden floors, chairs arranged in a crescent arc. Guests entered, one by one. Raymond, the longtime legal advisor, took the front row. Sophie arrived late, clutching a leather folder as if walking into a shareholder meeting. Gregory Hartley, still in his wheelchair, was brought in by the medical team. His eyes were distant yet alive. And when Leona emerged from backstage, he stared without blinking. The light narrowed to a soft circle. The room held its breath. Amira stepped out. No uniform, just a gray silk blouse and simple black trousers. But in the light, she looked like an artist, not a server. She stood center stage, lifted her chin. No greeting, no announcement. The music began. Moon River is an acoustic version with just piano and violin. Each note is like breath, like a wound being stitched with sound. Leona wheeled in from stage left. She stopped beside Amira. They touched hands. The entire room seemed to hold still. Then they moved. Amira rolled her shoulders gently, turning. Leona dipped her own, lowered her arm, and flicked 2 fingers in rhythm. They circled one another. One standing, one seated, not in contrast but in harmony. Amira tapped the floor softly with her prosthetic leg. Leona drummed on her armrest with the palm of her hand. Then, in one breathless moment, Amira gently spun Leona's chair along an arc. A seated pirouette. The room froze. One small turn, but enough to make people see. This wasn't a girl in a wheelchair. This was a dancer. As the music slowed, Leona lifted her arm high. Amira took her hand. Together, they bowed. No one laughed. No one clapped immediately, because everyone was swallowing something that had just cracked open inside them. Then, Raymond stood. Then a board member. Then the entire front row. Applause. Not the kind that pities. The kind that recognizes. A woman near the aisle wiped her eyes. A kitchen worker peeked in through the back door, nodding nonstop. An older man tapped his fingers to the final rhythm. Sophie didn't stand. But she didn't leave. Backstage, Leona was breathing hard, but her smile didn't fade. She turned to Amira. "You saw that?" Amira nodded, squeezing her hand gently. A promise was just fulfilled. Raymond stepped in. Two board members followed behind. "Miss Leona," one said, "your performance wasn't just art. It was a rebuttal." Before Leona could respond, Raymond placed a folder on the table. Formal proposal. Establish the still-moving adaptive arts program under the Hartley Foundation. To be directed by Amira Dasgupta. Amira opened her mouth to speak, but Leona spoke first. She's not going back to the kitchen. She's going to teach people how to find their rhythm again. The woman from the board nodded slowly. Then perhaps it's time this company invested in what makes people want to rise. Whether by foot, by hand, or by the smallest beat of a rhythm. When the night ended, Leona sat alone on stage. Light. Not because she could dance, but because she had just given someone a stage and claimed one for herself. 10 days after the performance at Wexley, a video clip exactly 1 minute and 47 seconds long began circulating on social media. No intro. No title. Just a shaky handheld shot starting with Amira Dasgupta wheeling Leona Hartley onto a small stage under soft lights with faint piano playing in the background. As Leona spun gently in her chair, the filming whispered, "Oh my God." And the clip ended just as their hands met in a final bow. The post was anonymous. No Hartley logo. No promo hashtags. But within 72 hours, it hit 11 million views. The comments came in like a storm. "I've never cried from a single turn. This is the stage every disabled child deserves to see. Please, someone tell me who they are." She didn't stand. But I did. A week later, the New London Herald ran the headline. Leona Hartley, the last silent heir of Gregory Hartley, just brought her family's legacy into the age of grace. The Still Moving Center officially opened in a modest office on the ground floor of a worn-down Camden building. No big signs. No leather chairs. Just a wooden floor, no steps, no carpet. A small sound system. A row of mirrors reflecting imperfect but real bodies. Amira stood in the middle of the room. The first class had 12 people. An older man with Parkinson's, and one one-year-old girl is paralyzed from the waist down. A young man missing one arm from a construction accident. And a quiet woman named Estelle, once a Hartley janitor who had quit after being mocked. Leona was there not as founder. She sat in the corner, shoulder against the mirror, eyes bright. Amira didn't start with introductions or mission statements. She just hit play. Not Moon River, but Rise by Andra Day. As the chorus rose, I'll rise like the day. Amira clapped once. Estelle looked around. No one laughed. No one hesitated. Then one person raised an arm. Then another. A shoulder rolled. A head tilted. Not in sync. Not perfect. But real. Meanwhile, Sophie Aldridge was undergoing an internal review in the boardroom at Hartley Global. On the giant LED screen, the clip of Leona and Amira played. A board member asked, "Sophie, why did you request the dismissal of the very employee who delivered our biggest PR triumph in 3 years?" Sophie held her polished smile. "I acted by hierarchy and brand protection, and Leona acted by humanity." Another member cut in. And just like that, power began to shift. That afternoon, Leona returned to the recovery center where her father was staying. She handed him a newspaper. Front page. A photo of her and Amira mid-spin. Headline, "We're still moving." He said nothing. But as Leona began to pull the paper away, his hand caught the edge. A light hold. No words. But Leona understood. He had seen. And he had chosen to stay with her. Leona turned on the camera in front of her mirror that night. She said, "I didn't invent anything. I just stopped accepting silence as the standard. If you feel like you don't belong on any stage, build one at your level. And if you feel like you can't stand, make the world sit down to hear you." Then she pressed send. And thousands began replying with videos. Former dancers, disabled teachers, cancer patients, and teenagers battling depression. A wave no one had planned. A revolution without a megaphone. All it took was one silent spin, and the world began to move. 3 weeks after the Still Moving Center's launch, Leona was invited to appear on the popular morning talk show, The Albion Table, a program known for spotlighting influential figures in the community. At first, she hesitated. She had avoided the spotlight for a full year. Since the accident, every paparazzi photo felt like a verdict, a media sentence branding her as the fallen heir, the imperfect successor. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't appearing as Gregory Hartley's daughter. She was showing up as the founder of Still Moving, something she had built from silence that had been transformed. The studio was colder and brighter than she'd expected. The host, Martha Vale, was known for being sharp, composed, and immune to sentimentality. She sat upright, a thick folder of notes in front of her. After a brief opening monologue, the camera panned to Leona. She sat opposite Martha, hands resting lightly on her lap. Martha began. Leona Hartley, just months ago, your name had all but vanished from the public sphere. Now you're at the center of a social wave. What changed? Leona smiled, slowly. I stopped waiting for someone else to shine a light on me. I built my stage, small enough to fit me, but wide enough for others to step onto with me. Some say this was just an emotional moment, a one-off performance that sparked sympathy but will soon fade. Your thoughts? Leona tilted her head, eyes locked on the camera. If people think a single wheelchair spin was a performance, then I'm ready to perform for the rest of my life. We're not performing to ask for pity. We exist to remind the world that no one needs to be perfect to be seen. The studio held its breath. Martha gave a soft chuckle. A clever answer. But, would you say you're using disability to rebuild your family's public image? Leona's expression didn't shift. I used to be the quiet daughter in the Hartley legacy. If I'm using anything now, it's my silence to listen to those who were never invited to speak. And what about Miss Amira Dasgupta? Some claim she's the true leader behind all this. She's the only one who helped me when I didn't know who I was anymore. And if I stand in her shadow, I'm proud. True light doesn't spotlight itself. It spreads. Martha paused. Then, like a final jab, so what's next? A motivational speaking tour? A personal brand? A seat on the Hartley board? Leona smiled, slowly. What's next? I plan to sit down and make space for others to speak. Are you afraid of being forgotten? I've been forgotten. That's not what I fear. What scares me most is having the power to create change and choosing to do nothing. After the show, a single quote from the interview went viral. I don't need to stand to be heard. I need to sit in the right place and hold the mic. The line became a headliner on event banners and social media posts, and it was even printed on t-shirts sold to support the Still Moving Center. That evening, Leona received a voicemail. The voice was raspy but firm. Hello, Leona. This is Mayor Naya Hamid of Bristol. We've just approved the renovation of the city's main performance hall. I'd like you to help design a space with seated audiences and dancers. We're aiming to build the first stage in the UK, designed for everybody, and we think no one is better suited than you to begin. Leona didn't cry. She returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and typed the subject line. Still Moving. City Edition. And she began to write. One cloudy May afternoon in Bristol, the sky was heavy but dry. The outdoor stage had just been completed, nestled in the city center square, designed as a full circle with dual ramps, low seats, and no steps in architecture that placed no one above anyone else. Media arrived from across the continent, but not for a celebrity. They came to witness the inauguration of the Still Moving stage, the first in Europe built for multi-embodiment movement arts. Leona didn't give a speech. She declined all prepared remarks. Instead, she sat quietly at the edge of the stage, dressed in a simple black blouse. Her wheelchair was now custom designed with engraved African patterns on the wheels, matte silver trim, and velvet-lined armrests. At precisely 4 p.m., the music began. Not Moon River, not Rise, but an original symphony composed by a blind musician from Birmingham, one of the first graduates of the Still Moving Center. The composition opened with a subtle rhythm, not drums, not piano, but the sound of wheels rolling and a prosthetic foot tapping on wood. Then came the violin, and a deep voice read aloud. We were once the ground, something others stepped over. Now, we are at the stage where every movement has meaning. We do not rise. We move. And that is enough to change the world. Amira stepped forward. Behind her followed over 20 performers, each with a different form. An arm amputee, a petite woman, a person with quadriplegia, in a powered wheelchair, a tall man with a hunched spine. No two were alike. And yet, they all moved to their rhythms, not synchronized, but in harmony. In the rising tempo, Leona wheeled herself to the center stage, not as a leader, not as the focus. She turned one quiet spin, just as she had that night. No applause, because the entire crowd stood, not to clap, but to move with them. Hundreds, audience members, politicians, children, elders, began to lift arms, sway shoulders, tilt heads, tap feet, each in their way. A city in motion, not following a pattern, not confined to one melody, but moved by freedom. Leona lifted her gaze. She looked around. Wind threaded through her hair. The sky was a dull gray like a fogged mirror, but she could see light, not from above, from the people moving all around her. She didn't cry. She whispered to the air, "I'm still dancing, Dad. But now, I'm not dancing alone." And just like that, still moving was no longer a center. It became a symbol, a reminder, a spark, for everyone who had ever been told they should sit still. The end. A story of Leona Hartley, Amira Dasgupta, and all those who continue to move quietly, fiercely, even when the world once tried to make them still.